This is part 3 of the readings of The Secret Team, carrying on where I left off yesterday. However, as this continues to grow, I will probably lose track, so know that I'm on page XXXIV. By reading this out loud, not only are the spiritual shifts being felt, but people who would not be able to otherwise read the documentation within this book, if they listen to me speak it through dialogue, as in reading the information, they will then be able to understand the content. My understanding is that I'm being watched within my own home and recorded and videotaped, and I have been for years now. And no matter where I go, I have people watching me, and I'm not what a lot of you would consider schizophrenic or anything like that. I have a spiritual background. I have intelligence level beyond your own imagination, and I am a scientist first and foremost. Let's begin. It must be clear that at the heart of covert operations is the denial by the operator. Your first sign that the government is attempting to hinder your freedom. So I would imagine a lot of other people are experiencing the same thing, as in am I being watched? Likely you are, especially if it depends on any reportings that you've done, any conspiracy theories that you have, etc., etc., etc. Your government is not your friend in the current state of situation, and they've always only had themselves at first thought. And I've known this all along, that they've been watching. I have unspokenly given them permission. The U.S. government of the existence of national sovereignty. The covert operator can and does make the world his playground, including the USA. Today, early 1990, the most important events of this century are taking place with the ending of the Cold War era, and we're in the middle of it. In the beginning of the new age of one world, which is possible if we do the work that's necessary to get the corruption ceased, fire. Under the control of businessmen and their lawyers, rather than the threat of military power. This scenario for change has been brought about with a series of secret team operations, skillfully orchestrated while the contrived hostilities of the Cold War were at their zenith. The Cold War is very hard for people to wrap their heads around, because the Cold War was about psychological warfare. Meaning, even in school, I remember learning about the Cold War, but I could never understand what the Cold War was until I read Colonel's book, because the Cold War was a bunch of propaganda guiding the masses into believing that Russia was bad, that China was no good, that this person's not worthy, all these different things based on what the media has said, based on what we have is TikTok, a sexualization of society, which then brings about riots on the street, mass quantities of RAPERs, and then women who act as if they're victims when they're the cause of it. A new fashion industry where women don't even wear clothing, where they walk on stage and get spray painted. A horrific existence for the future, because no laws are new laws. And it stems from the millennial generation that you like to put on pedestal, who have no spiritual background, nor no intelligence, and they're all the ones teaching the spirituality work. However, they have no ethics, morals, value, nor do they even know what integrity is. A generation that had their faces in their phones. Aliens and demons took over their bodies, and they do not exist as human beings any longer. Now, don't get me wrong, there's more in other generations, not just millennials. Gen Xers have them, boomers have them, etc., etc. But were you willing to battle the demon, or did you take the demon on as if you owned it, is the question. a morality so low in history that it is causing the demise of Earth, as they mass produce crappy clothing that ends up on the beach in Africa as they claim Black Lives Matter American. Chief among these, quite yet unnoticed, President Nixon and his Secretary of Treasury, George Shultz, established a Russian-American organization called USSR Trade and Economic Council in 1972. Its objective was to bring about a union of the Fortune 500 chief executive officers of this country, among others such as the hierarchy of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce with his counterparts in the Soviet Union. This important relationship, sponsored by David Rockefeller of Chase Manhattan Bank, Anderson Cooper, and his associates, continued through the Carter years. The bilateral activity increased significantly during the Reagan-Schultz years of the 80s, despite such evil empire tantrums as the Korean Airlines Boeing 747 flight 007 shoot down in 1983. It is this U.S. TEC organization, with its counterpart bilateral agreements among other nations in the USSR, that was brought about the massive communist world changes. The Cold War has been the most expensive war in history. R. Buckminster Fuller was written in Grunch of Giants. We can properly call World War I the $1 Million War, and World War II the $1 Billion War, and World War III the Cold War and $1 Trillion War. The power structure that kept the Cold War at the level of intensity has been driven by the secret team and its multinational covert operations, to wit. Now, considering that we're in a World War V, World War IV, I'm not really sure, because we are in a war of some sort. However, y'all are not being aware of the fact that we're in a war because no one has declared the word war. Money talks in that the $1 trillion war is now a quadrillion dollar war, because millennial Gen Z generation is stealing from the older elderly generation, pocketing the money and then not paying taxes. So I'm not really sure where all the money is coming to spread out our money across the globe to all kinds of other nations besides the one nation that needs it the most. As children like Charlie D'Amelio and Dixie D'Amelio and Noah Beck collect hundreds of thousands of dollars from corporate companies like Dunkin' Donuts by merely standing with a glass in her hand, looking at the camera for 1 minute, seductively sipping a drink that is penetrating you with the amount of sugar that you need in a whole week. LSD, very comparable in sugar, as in sugar and acid and cocaine are similar in characteristics, as in physical doctors have studied this. However, Starbucks utilizes it as a weapon in mass destruction to guide the masses to sit in their fancy chairs in their lobbies to buy more, as they ask you to put money on your account so they can utilize it for interest rates as they increase their money and grow their businesses and close down local shops while they grow coffee beans in shit soil. However, America says nothing and cheers them on as if they're heroes. And corporate America and entrepreneurs invite them onto their podcasts and allow them to shape the minds of more minds out to create the same thing. And then I wonder often, and what mindset you would think that eventually this all wouldn't catch up to us, in the sense that the earth can only take so much poison on its shoulders. Its head is rotting to the core, yet you want to use fracking to split it open. And that's where we're at. As mind manipulators take the lead, like CNN, MSNBC, and make sure you take a look at the female who's standing before you reporting the news with her makeup and hair done oh so perfectly. Or the woman standing next to the entrepreneur that flies all over the globe wearing nothing but lace, attempting to fuel mass destruction in the form of riots. However, everybody thinks that's just fine because look how lovely she is. You know, she's a health professional with no degree. And the man who runs behind him holding his purse as he pays for everything. And that goes for every last one of you as you stand on your podiums and spout off what a home wife does, which is a lot of work, although you have a maid and a chef and a nanny. So I'm not really sure what you are thinking when you are spouting lies once again. A real man no longer exists, except a showman who's a manipulator who attempts to make more money so the upper class can create income and the lower class gets nothing. Except your signature, a handshake, and a violent abuse session next to the woman that you chose. We'll stop this session here and move on to the Secret Team 2 preface. I want to let you know that Jesse Ventura wrote a foreword for this book, and also let you know that he had an altercation with a sniper shooter named Chris. And once that happened, Chris ended up dead somehow. So I find it quite coincidental that a politician who's very familiar with the works of Prouty, and who's very interested in his reputation, considering his history, was a famous wrestler, and how he read the lines and books of this book, and now one of our top snipers, Chris, is now dead because he was embarrassed because he got yelled at for some of his violent words that he spoke of our honest military. And I have discussed this with Joe Rogan, yet he still says nothing by emailing him in his Instagram account to let you know. Yet here we are still waiting for you to man up Joe Rogan as the #1 podcaster on the globe, to be honest with you, as they all try to bite at your heels to catch up. As you stand before a liar, Gabbard, who is literally lying, letting you know that she's only flipping parties because her attempt is to still get the Democratic Party in the lead, but this time she's going to lie and say she's an independent. Because as long as they can mind manipulate the masses into believing this actress is on their side, then they will be able to still manipulate the masses into keeping things secret. So take a look at Tulsi Gabbard's record and how she's starting to show up now all over Fox News and flush the asses of Joe Rogan, Tucker, and the rest. Great hair and makeup. I really think it looks good on you.